So thank you everyone for joining us again today. My name is Hannah.
Hello, my name is Jenna, and today we have another music therapist joining us. Jasmine, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jasmine Edwards. I've been a music therapist since I think 2015, and I'm based in Brooklyn, New York. Right now, I am pursuing my PhD at NYU within Steinhardt, focusing on music education with the focus in music therapy.
We're going to jump way back to the beginning about how you found out about music therapy. What was your process like applying to colleges? Was it something that you knew instantly you wanted to do, or what was your journey in the music therapy beginnings?
Yeah. So when I was applying to college, I was actually mostly applying as a history major, thinking I would go on this like pre-law track. I'm not sure where I got that from. I think I just was always liking to argue growing up, and so people would say like, "Oh, you should be a lawyer," that kind of messaging. So I applied to most schools with that in mind, but then I went to a high school for the performing arts in South Florida, and I was a vocal major. And in Florida, there's this thing called Bright Futures, where if you have like a certain GPA, you can go to a state school basically for free. And so my parents were like, that's what you're doing. You're staying in state. And I had gone to this performing arts school and had known about how Florida State had a really strong music program. So that kind of piqued my interest. And then I went to, they had a chorus camp that they did every summer for high school students. So I went after my junior year to this camp, and they had like seminars for the high school students about different majors in music, just aside from performance. So the seminar went over like commercial music, music ed, and also music therapy. And at that time, I had just finished taking AP psychology. And the way it was kind of presented to us was, this combination of psychology and music. And I was like, oh, it's kind of interesting to me. I really liked psychology. And then right when I got home, my dad had just coincidentally, I think it was probably TiVo, because TiVo was the first recording system for TV. I think he had TiVo'd this documentary on PBS called The Music Instinct. And it was mostly featuring like Bobby McFerrin and Yo-Yo Ma, but they had interviewed a lot of music therapists. And one music therapist that they showed was working with people who had experienced a stroke and showing how music therapy could support the rehabilitation of speech. And my grandmother had had a stroke around that same time, so it became really kind of salient and significant to me. And I just went for it, applied as a music therapy major to FSU, got in, and I'm on my third degree. So I guess it stuck. Yeah, so that's how it happened. Yeah.
So I don't actually know this information for sure. Are you what I forget, somebody else said it, a music therapy like purebred, in the sense that you got undergrad music therapy, grad music therapy, PhD music therapy?
I've never heard that before, but I guess technically, I mean, right now my PhD is kind of interesting. It's not technically a PhD in music therapy, because it's underneath this umbrella of music education, which for me as a student works really well, because it kind of allows me to customize my track. So maybe not like in its purest form, but pretty close, I would argue. Yeah.
I would agree.
Yeah.
You're thinking kind of back on your different college experiences. What did you really enjoy about it? And what were some things that maybe if you could do it again, you would change, or you would want to see grow within the different programs?
No, that's such a good question. That's so interesting to think about, because the way I kind of talk about my journey is that as an undergraduate student, I mean, you're so young when you have to decide your major and like the rest of your life. So to be totally honest, I was always interested in music therapy, but I didn't really feel like my passion being ignited until I went to my internship. So after I had gone through 4 years of coursework and was kind of thinking like, yeah, I like this, but maybe I'll get my master's in something different. I was interested in arts administration for a while. And I attribute that mostly to, I guess, kind of limited experiences and actually seeing people do the work and having exposure to like diverse perspectives too, of like people who have different theoretical underpinnings and of different social locations working. So it was hard for me to like really see myself as a practitioner. And so I think that's why I maybe felt a bit lukewarm for a while. So it wasn't until I went to my internship, which I actually did in the Northeast at a center in New Jersey. And I met people who were, grew out of a different theoretical orientation than what I had been exposed to at FSU. And this is not at all me creating any hierarchy between different, theoretical underpinnings. But for me, I was exposed to something that started to like really resonate with who I was as a person. And I just felt like such a kinship with these supervisors at this site that made me feel like, oh, that's the thing people are talking about that I think I want to do myself. I want to be that kind of clinician. So I guess to answer your question, like I guess it would have been cool if I had that moment a little bit earlier, but I think that feels like kind of a tall order when you're like 19 years old. I don't know if I would have been really ready for that or known myself well enough to even identify like, oh, this is what resonates with me, on a core level until I was, leaving undergrad.
I think that's kind of normalized, Jenna. I don't know if you feel the same way. I don't think I really knew what was going on either until internship, really.
Really?
It sort of, I feel like it's hard to conceptualize it because you get such a brief exposure before then, and then when you're kind of thrown into it for 6 months straight, you really get a chance to kind of like knead out the kinks. And I feel like I've heard a lot of people say that, so I think that's, relatively typical.
That's nice to hear. That gives me some solace of like, yeah, this is kind of how it goes. Definitely. Yeah.
Can you speak a little bit on what theoretical orientations really do resonate with you? And has that changed over the course of you being a practitioner? And how do you use those in your day-to-day work?
Absolutely. Yes. I was really drawn to get my master's at NYU because of the more humanistic and psychodynamic underpinnings of the folks who are teaching there. And of like the traditions that program kind of grew out of. So that resonated with me because I think I was already experimenting with working in a way that was based in improv because it felt organic to me, even though I really wasn't taught it so formally at that point in time. And I also I'm still very interested in the why of things, which I guess makes sense for why I'm going down this research path. Like, why are we drawn to certain kinds of music, and why do we like what could this be illuminating about our internal experience? And I was curious about that for myself and for the folks that I was endeavoring to work with. So that drew me to NYU, and I definitely still resonate with that way of conceptualizing the work, sitting in the why and being curious about the why. And I think as time has gone on and I really have explored the role of my own social location in my identity as a clinician and in the therapeutic relationships that I have been within, I've come to identify as being aligned with culturally humble practices, culturally affirming practices, and also anti-oppressive practice. And I feel kind of funny about saying that, like, that is my orientation, because both of those lenses really feel very aspirational. Like I'm always working towards integrating them more fully and embodying them. So I'm in process, I think, with both of those ways of working. They're very aspirational for me. And I'm excited that a lot of other people seem to be invested and curious about what this could mean for us as a profession.
So I'm curious with those specifically, but also in general, when you were looking for internship, was that something that you were also exposed to in that period of time? Or when applying for internships, did you kind of have a choice where you could go and chose very intentionally? Or in terms of internship, how did that sort of shape you?
It feels maybe kind of different for undergrad and for graduate internships. So for undergrad, you know what? To be so honest, I was like trying to get out of Florida. I was like, what can I do to get out of Florida? And this is not bashing Florida, but I am not like a native Floridian. I grew up in like New England. So I moved to Florida like middle school and, stayed there through college. So I was really like desperate to kind of get back to what I knew as my home. And so that really informed where I wanted to go. And I kind of discovered later on that there were like these regional differences in terms of how the philosophies of different schools, and then in turn, the practitioners or the clinicians in those communities. So that was really the big reason for my undergraduate internship. And I also really needed a place that could offer me a stipend, a place to live. So that really informed my decision, which kind of speaks to a bigger issue in music therapy about the accessibility of our profession, the accessibility of training. So those were my big deciding factors. And of course, a setting where I could work with children. That was something that I was really curious about. But philosophically speaking, I don't think I really knew or really understood what the difference was. I learned that through my internship. And to be so honest, I think I kind of learned that as well in my graduate internship. My kind of reckoning with my identity happened when I was a graduate intern, really working with Black and brown children and their families and feeling really identified and exploring countertransference, really what kind of the work like showed this to me, that it was important to me and that it was totally underinvestigated within myself. So I think I kind of, sorted that out while I was in both of those internships.
Yeah.
Which now I'm like back in my memory, I was like, yeah, that was kind of intense. That was kind of, I'm not sure if you had those experiences, but I feel like both of them for me were like so transformational. I feel for students whenever I'm working with people who are at their internship, and I'm like, be gentle with yourself because there's a lot, there's a lot going on right now.
Yeah, and I feel like it does. It has so much to do with just, it's really your first time doing it, and being in it and being on your own doing it, sorting things out. And it is. It's, I like the word transformational because it does feel like that.
Yeah. Definitely.
So after undergrad, did you jump into work immediately or go straight into grad school? What was that process like?
Yeah, I was curious about grad school. I'm not sure exactly what kind of made me think about it, but I was curious about it when I was still doing my internship. And my supervisor, one of the supervisors at this site said, I recommend that you go for this now before you change your mind. Like ride the wave of being interested in getting your master's before you talk yourself out of it, sort of thing. I was like, okay, that's pretty valid. So I was already like, I think applying and interviewing when I was finishing up my internship, because for Florida State, the way it was like 4 full years of coursework. And then I started my internship in June. So it was like just, December, I was kind of visiting these schools, which worked out for graduate school applications. And then I moved back home. My parents were in South Florida at the time. So I worked for a private practice doing work at an outpatient clinic, and then also some contract work like in the community for just about like nine or 10 months or so. And then I moved up to New York that fall. So it was a really short amount of time that I was working clinically before it's almost back to back. Undergrad to master's. Yeah.
So in terms of the CBMT exam, was that something that you were studying for during your internship and took right away, or just kind of wung it? And what was your experience kind of like, or what tips do you have also for students who are preparing to take the exam?
Such a good question. Yeah. I think I was making my game plan during my internship, but I was very graciously hired by a place that said that as long as you get your MTBC like within the first 6 months of working here, that's totally fine. So I got hired I was applying to jobs when I was still an intern. So I had started a job like the month after I finished internship. So say like January, I guess, of 2015. And so I was studying while I was working. So I probably had like a month or so of more intense studying. But somebody gave me the really good advice of like, don't focus so much about like memorizing content, focus on learning the test, because you as a, emerging clinician might know what you would want to do or what makes the most sense, but like that matters, but it doesn't matter for the test. Trying to think about like, well, what does the test think their best answer is? Which was really good advice. And that's the advice I continue to give. I don't know, do you two think that is true, to kind of focus on like understanding the test more than focusing on accumulating, more content?
I was always told it's not what's on the test, it's knowing how to take the test. And I think when I was studying for it, I found the practice test the most helpful for that, because then you were kind of able to look at the questions and see how they asked the questions and what maybe they were looking for, or what theoretical orientation they were thinking of versus maybe something different than you kind of were going into.
Exactly. Yeah.
Jenna, was that your experience too?
Yeah, I feel like what I really struggled with was only taking the information that they put in those questions. Like, I feel like I was always trying to think of like, oh, this could also be happening to influence it. So it could be B when they're looking for answer A. So I feel like that was definitely a challenge of look at the information they're giving and like use everything that they put in that. And they use very specific wording to lead you to an answer and not putting in like extra information that I might be making up in my head.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
So in terms of also education related, continuing education and kind of getting all those credits to be able to, I'm sure some of that was covered actually by the schooling and graduate degrees. But in terms of what is your sort of preferred method for continuing ed, going to conferences or taking different trainings? I know it's probably a little different also because you're in New York, so there's the whole licensure thing to kind of combat with.
Yes, that is an important consideration. Like, oh, is this going to get me LCAT and CBMT credits, which most places in New York that is considered, which is really helpful. Gosh, yeah, I took my first like round of getting those first 5 years were covered mostly by graduate courses, but now I think my preferred method is conferences. I do try to go to conferences regularly and try to present, and I really enjoy presenting with other people. I'm trying to think, I just put my credits in. I'm like, what else did I write in there? Oh, I also did I also got my vocal psychotherapy training, so that also helped with a lot of points as well. So I guess these opportunities for like different certifications, presenting. I've heard, I don't know if I've actually tried this out, but I've heard if you write something, that also can help. So that has been, I've really been enjoying writing a bit more, and so thankful for like the opportunity to do that a bit more. Yeah, those have been most of what I've been doing, but also I've gone to a couple of really great presentations in the, in New York community. One of them that comes to mind was the Queering Music Therapy panel that Malloy did, which was really awesome. And it's so great that so many things are virtual now too. I know that, being virtual has its pros and cons, but in terms of accessibility and be able to really connect with people from all over the country, it's really, really great. So yeah, I guess a mix of things, but it is nice to be able to try some stuff out, try to kind of workshop your own ideas in different forums.
Would you be interested in talking a little bit about different things that you present on and what really speaks to you and the messages that you try to share?
Yeah, absolutely. It's actually Gabby, and I really refer to her as like my partner in so much of this work, because my first presentation or like workshop I ever kind of created more formally was with Gabby. So we have been co-presenting and also individually presenting on the role of culturally humble practice, culturally affirming, culturally reflexive practice within therapeutic relationships, but also collegial and supervisory relationships as well. So that's been one really big area that I present about and write about, and I've been teaching this course at NYU and a few other spaces as well. So that's a big part of my work, and I really like trying to truly embody that humble perspective of like, I am continually learning, and it's not that I'm in this role of expert, it's that I feel connected to this, and whenever I teach, it's collaborative. It's based on the community that I'm in, the room of people that I'm in, and we're kind of all working together to uncover what this means and how it relates to our work as music therapists. So that's I guess the biggest area that I present on and talk about. I now teach children's methods at NYU as well. I've given some other guest lectures about the role of the voice in clinical practice as well. I'm a primary vocalist and also getting my vocal psychotherapy training, presenting a bit about also just music therapy in a medical pediatric setting. I had Gabby's previous position at Kravis Children's Hospital, and before that I worked in the NICU. So also talking about, NICU work, which is so connected to the voice. I guess those are, I feel like I'm not doing a very good job of saying what I've done. There's probably some other things that I'm missing, but those are the areas that are top of mind for me right now. Definitely cultural humility is something that I'm exploring in my doctoral studies as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of pointing into that in terms of supervision, what do you find in supervision works best for you as a supervisee, but also as a supervisor in supervising students or interns or other professionals?
Oh, that's such a good question. Yes. I've had the good fortune of having some really awesome supervisors, and it's actually making me think of that kind of moment of like transformation when I was a graduate intern working with the amazing Judy Rubin Bosco and Susan Feiner. Judy was my internship supervisor and Susan was my internship seminar leader at school. And one thing that I found extremely healing in my work with them was that when I told them something that happened to me or that I was feeling, they believed me, which sounds so basic, but I think, as a woman of color, where I've been, told that, oh, I'm pulling the race card, or that really didn't happen to you, or are you sure you're not being overly sensitive? To work with folks who said, I believe your story and I'm taking it seriously was hugely, transformational for me. And it taught me about how that could be important for other people. So that's a really, I think, important cornerstone of how I want to be a supervisor, that you believe people. And again, it sounds so basic, but in a world where, people endeavor to denigrate and make you second guess yourself or kind of jeopardize your own self-trust. I mean, that can be really important, especially in that really fragile period of being an intern or an emerging professional. To be able to cultivate that inner voice feels really significant, and I know it's really important to me. So feeling believed, feeling like I'm trusted, that you trust me to kind of do this work and to share what is salient feels really good to me. And that has really informed the way that I want to be a supervisor as well. And I think care, like an ethic of care, is really important too. And I think about that a lot in academia as well. Because I have felt or heard from students that they feel as though the institution doesn't care for them, care about their well-being. So I've been kind of mulling over how do you communicate care? And I think sometimes I just say it straight up, I know this thing is really hard, but it's coming from a place of care. I care about you and I care about your well-being and your success here, and this is my job. I'm committed to finding a way to make that really clear to you, and a pathway for us to address this challenge in the way that is the most supportive and generative for you. So communicating care, it makes me feel good to feel that way too. And even now as a PhD student, that has been so important, that I feel as though people are taking care of me and looking out for me. And I want other people to feel that way too, that I'm in your corner, and that we can get through this together. I'm on your team.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's a very vulnerable process, so I'm sure that is appreciated by all of your students.
Yeah, I hope so. It is so vulnerable. Yeah, and it sucks when you feel as though you're alone, or you feel like I'm the only person who has felt this way before, and how validating it can be to kind of share it and have someone say yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I believe that that's what you're going through right now, and I'm taking it seriously.
So kind of thinking on the job side, in terms of looking for jobs, I know you had mentioned it was a relatively brief time between schooling periods. So perhaps in sort of the more broad aspects of job searching, what do you find helpful when going for interviews or interviewing with people in different jobs? And what do you like to look for and feel in that kind of setting?
Ooh, that's a really good question. As soon as you started talking, my mind went to more of the space of how do you network? How do you schmooze? But I love how you just asked this, because it's really making sure that we are going into the space that actually works best for us, and that you are also interviewing the setting. It's not just about them interviewing you. So that's such a great exercise to think about, what are my non-negotiables? What are my needs for me to do my best work, or for me to be in the most like growth promoting setting. So wow, I mean, I think I was looking for places where I definitely had supervision, which again should be a given, but there's so many places where that's not ensured. Or maybe there's not a music therapist on site. So I was looking for a place where I definitely could have regular supervision, and if there was not a music therapist, that there would be support in me working with a music therapist externally, which I also recommend, people who are applying for jobs to think about. I now work with I'm the external supervisor for a few music therapists who are at a site who don't have a music therapist in-house. So I can definitely see how important having the support of your employer around that is. And gosh, yeah, I think I also really enjoy working on a team. I have learned about myself, a very social person. I'm a Leo. I definitely lean extrovert and I get a lot of energy from other people. And I love I love the community and being able to like bounce off ideas from other folks and to kind of corroborate like, oh, I saw this happen in the session. Like, what do you think about that? That makes me feel much more grounded. So also thinking about, am I in a place where collaboration is really valued? I'm going to have a chance to co-treat or at least be in a more team kind of treatment setting. That's my personal preference, but also in the same vein, a place where I maybe will still have some freedom to kind of do my own thing and have my own schedule and create programming in different ways is also something that's interesting to me. Have freedom, but with the underpinning of support, I guess. That perfect combination of like both support and challenge is really specific, but I think important that you feel as though you're continuing to grow in this role. Yeah, those are some things that I definitely have thought about and I recommend other folks think about when they're applying. And also knowing that I know I have been in a place where I was like, I need a job immediately. I need a paycheck right now. And it made me take some things that actually weren't right for me. And I knew I had that gut feeling of like, oh, this doesn't seem like it has everything in place. It's not maybe as organized as I would want it to be. And if I could go back, I would say to honor that instinct and that another job that's a better fit for you will come. It just might not be as quickly as you want it to be, but it will be worth the wait. So to kind of silence that like urgency of like, I have to take this thing because it's offered to me and actually really wait for the thing that feels best for you. Yeah.
You're not the first person to say that either.
Really? Yeah, that makes sense. Definitely.
So can you talk, I know you spoke a little bit about this earlier. Can you speak a little bit on the different positions that you've held and where you really grew as a practitioner in each of those experiences?
Yes. So I started as a music therapist in a more of an outpatient clinic setting. So working with young autistic children. And then I also was doing some contract work in some different community organizations. And then let's see, I did my pre-internship for graduate school at Nordoff Robbins. So that also is more, kind of, I would categorize it as outpatient clinic setting. Then I worked in a therapeutic preschool for my internship and I loved it so much. I was like, that's when I was really in my schmoozing era. I was like, what can I possibly do to stay here? I don't want to leave. I just loved it so much. I loved working in a school setting. I liked working with teachers. I liked being a part of that whole school culture. I found it really, really satisfying and really fulfilling. And so then, because I was just badgering everybody to give me a job, they did hire me to work in an outpatient clinic underneath the same like nonprofit umbrella. So there I created, with the support of Judy, this drop-in child caregiver music therapy group called Music for Us. So I did that on site, and then I went out into the community and did groups at different early learn centers, which I also really loved. Like that 3 to 5 age group is just so much fun. And I also really liked learning how to support the school community. And that's really where I think a lot about my understanding of cultural humility kind of solidified, of like, it isn't about me coming in as expert and teaching them something or giving them something that they don't already have, because they already have a lot of resources and strengths, and they as community members know what works best for them. So my job is really just to validate, support, and highlight the things that are already going on, and maybe offer some new ways of being in music based off of that. So I really loved that work so much. And then I started working in the NICU, which also I really liked. Love working with little ones and caregivers, and I loved kind of digging into lullabies, as a like cultural artifact, and then working with families around making their meaningful songs into lullabies and exploring how music can support that really important relationship in the face of disruption, around hospitalization. So I grew a lot from that for sure. And then that definitely supported my transition into a full-time role in the medical pediatric setting. And that's where I feel like I got so much out of all of these jobs that I've been lucky enough to hold, but definitely working in the medical pediatric setting was totally life-changing. I felt like, oh, this is my thing. This is what this is what I want to do. And which is actually kind of strange, because for so long throughout my schooling, I was like, I'm never working in a hospital. It's too stressful. It's too chaotic. I can't do that whole, 2-week relationship. Like, I need a full year with everybody to really form that grounded relationship, which it can be legitimate, but ended up like loving the vibe of the hospital, of like, it used to terrify me to walk into work and not know what was going to happen. And then I was like, I love it. Like, who knows what's going to happen? It was like a challenge every day to figure that out. But I didn't I only felt that way because I was on a really big supportive team. And I just felt like, I had a lot of people in my corner. But it was perhaps the most transformational because I started that job in March 2020 in New York City. So I only knew my job in the context of a pandemic, and that heightened everything about an already really intense setting. I was in the PICU, I was in oncology and hematology unit, so the cases were already really, sometimes really heavy, and the clinical work itself was already really rigorous against the backdrop of this pandemic. And at the time, like, I was there when they were telling us, like, don't wear masks because that's not how it spreads, like all of those iterations of COVID. I was in the hospital for, and I worked all the way through. We never were at home. We were at bedside the whole time.
Wow.
So that was a game changer for me, and I still loved, which is so weird. I still loved being there. I loved the work despite this like profound uncertainty, which was a lot of information for me about what I'm drawn to and why. And yeah.
How do you feel like the pandemic then influenced your relationships with the patients in the hospital therapeutically?
Oh my gosh, that's such a good question. Wow, you're really good at this whole interview thing, the two of you. Wow, these are really good questions. No one's ever asked me that. I mean, it was it really was.
I imagine like it was so vulnerable that like you also didn't know what was happening in addition to them not knowing, and like you being in kind of a position of caring and service for them.
It was weird because and I'm curious if you two feel this way too, but it's like, oh, we're all going through this thing at the same time, right? Despite our differences in our experience and experience of hospitalization, that's already there. And also we're going through this global thing and we don't really know what's happening, and we all experience in different ways, but we had that commonality, which felt significant. And yeah, so much uncertainty, and it was really tough. It was so tough to kind of check that at the door about my own confusion and fear and be present. And I'm sure so many people can relate to that. And then what also was really challenging was we were also, my department at least, we were tasked with also supporting other medical staff too, which was like another kind of weird. So yeah, we're also all as coworkers, we're going through this all together, but then because of our medium, we were also caretaking for them. So we really upped like the environmental music therapy that we offered. I had so many days where we weren't sure about how much we could be at bedside, where I was mostly, we were playing for staff, you know, to try to address their experience of stress and anxiety and uncertainty. So it was like this, yeah, this strange kind of shared experience that was like kind of just permeating throughout all of the dynamics. And I think it really forced, I feel like it kind of expedited the rapport building process and the feelings of closeness and multiple relationships. I feel that way with my former coworkers, that we were like so tight, so fast, because we had to be, you know, we needed each other. We were like our only social outlet for like basically a year, which I'm so thankful for. I don't know what I would have done without that kind of community. So it just really expedited, I think, the feeling of closeness with everybody in the setting. And yeah. And it was then kind of like, then for that summer, with, you know, the Black Lives Matter protests as well, I think that also was like another like common thing, like, oh, we are all going through and witnessing this reckoning. And the hospital I worked at was right on Fifth Avenue, right by Central Park. So those protests were going right by the street and we're overlooking them. So that also came into the therapy room as well, about like, yeah, and how our own social locations interacted with that reality. So
it's wild to think about now.
I know. I'm like, I think I got a journal about that maybe or something. I should write that down and try to sort through it. It's a lot.
I feel like from my experience and from what I heard from other people, it's like a weird combination, because they always tell you to leave your own stuff at the door and don't bring your personal lives into the session. Mm-hmm. But how do you not, when the entire world is going through a pandemic and going through all of these huge cultural events that inevitably are going to impact a therapeutic relationship? I remember I was a student, but virtually, like, they found it comforting when I was like, guys, I don't know what's going on, you know, I don't know either, but we're here.
Yeah. And it feels more disconcerting to not acknowledge that, because like clearly something's different. You know, you went from seeing my face every day to now seeing half of my face every day. Like people, and especially I think with children, like they could feel something was wrong and people were scared. And so if you have these, you're picking up this energy as a child, but then no grownups are saying anything that's going on, you know, that doesn't feel like the most clinically indicated in some situations. So I agree, to be in the muck with people can be really important. Like, yeah, this is something else, isn't it? So like we could have some space to talk about it. And also maybe that acknowledgement is good enough, depending on the situations. Like we can name there's something going on, but what do we want to do together? And it doesn't mean that we're going to ignore it. We can integrate it, but acknowledging that we are together despite it all. We can be together. And what is that going to look like?
As you kind of think back and reflect, what kind of pops out as like the most surprising thing in your music therapy career?
The most surprising thing?
It could be anything, like client relationship, a situation, or an education, just something that maybe like you didn't expect.
I didn't expect, well, I already feel like even like verklempt even about to say this now, because it's so probably still like raw and I'm still understanding it. I didn't expect how many gifts the work would give me about knowing myself even better. I think because I got that messaging so early, like what you said before about like we leave our stuff at the door, we're like a blank slate, like that rhetoric, and learning that actually maybe isn't the best way, that it's kind of impossible to not bring in your identity, and how important it is that you actually do that in the interest of a really authentic, genuine relationship, that yourself must be in the room, and it actually can help deepen the dynamic and can be really important if you share identity with the person that you're working with, and you can go to different places in the work. And I think what part of what made my internship so transformational was like working with folks, young people, little ones, 3 to 5 year olds, who were like mirrors of myself, and things that I had pushed away, that I had thought like are not a thing I have to deal with anymore. It's done, it's dusted, I fixed it, I get it. And then the work is like, it's time for you to look at this. It's just time. And there's like such a solace about that like when you need to look at something, it will emerge as it needs to. And it's like such a gift of our work that to just show us ourselves. And it's like super intense too, and it's painful. And I was showed stuff that I didn't really want to look at, but it ended up being such a gift. I didn't expect that, but that I guess comes to the territory of when you are giving of yourself in relationship and that ethical obligation to understand yourself more deeply in the interest of the therapeutic relationship. So the work as mirror, I guess, is what I did not expect at all. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. Yeah. And I was like, oh, okay. Yeah.
I don't think that's something they tell you though. I don't feel like I knew that. I still don't feel like I know that.
Yeah, it always was like a surprise, like, oh, there's my stuff. And it's so beautiful sometimes, not to be so like woo-woo about it, but it is like, it comes back to like the relationship, and the relationship as being transformational and as like the cornerstone of our work, and what happens within the dynamic, and that being so fruitful to supporting growth and well-being. I feel very fortunate to have a job that lets me work in that way, for sure.
Can you talk about your self-care as well, and how to avoid burnout, as this profession that can happen so fast, so easily? How do you find that balance of prioritizing yourself and allowing yourself to be vulnerable and giving in your work?
Absolutely. I really had to rev this up during the pandemic, for sure. And I heard this really great, one of my coworkers showed me this podcast. It was actually a Brene Brown podcast, and I should definitely just have this book memorized, but it was actually two twin sisters wrote this book, and one of them was a music educator, and they wrote about like the burnout loop and or the stress cycle, where like, evolutionarily, like our bodies go into fight or flight, but we don't need those responses in the same way anymore. So you need to, if you get activated, you need to find a way to like come back down to, your homeostasis. So they talked about a couple different ways to do that. And one of them is physical activity, and there's breath, and other is music. So that podcast really put me on to moving my body intentionally every day. So I got into the habit of taking really long walks through Central Park. Like I'm talking like hour-long walks after work to just, get it out of me. And that kind of like rhythmic, almost meditative process of moving my body, I found really helpful. And I still do that a lot, to like take a walk, clear my head. But that combination of moving and just quiet or listening to music is really helpful for me. And yeah, community is huge too. Like, just spending time with other people, talking about what's on my mind and heart can be really helpful, both within the music therapy community and outside of it. And this also, again, is going to sound so basic, but I do feel like music therapists, we're not always reminded that we can also use music for our own well-being. We spend so much time learning how to use music to support other people, but what about our original relationship with music? And I really have been coming back to exploring music as ritual to move through difficult clinical moments. So one practice that I've been working on that I definitely got from my supervisor was when something really challenging would happen, especially around patient loss. That's something I really struggled with, kind of just making sense of, because I was so in it. It was me in relationship with this person, not just this like mask of a therapist. So really using music to process that and understand that more deeply. So one of my like practices is to play through a song that we often did together, or that reminds me of this person, and just to really honor like whatever comes back, and moving through it as sort of offering to this person that I worked with, or kind of an act of gratitude, and really sitting in that place of like, I'm so thankful that I got to know this person, that we had this time together, and I'm honored that they let me in at this really vulnerable moment in their journey, or their family's journey, has been really helpful for me. So, but I think the music holds all of that complexity. So really trying to hold myself accountable to use music for my own self-care and just, yeah, play for myself and really carve out time for that. And viewing music as ritual, I think, is really helpful in terms of, yeah, moving through more difficult emotions around the clinical work as they come up. So
Yeah.
That's constantly working on. I think self-care is like, you never like find your self-care things and then like you're done forever. Now you know how to always do your self-care. It's always changing. So next month I might be like, you know what, that thing I was doing doesn't work anymore. I have to explore something different.
Yeah.
So ongoing. Yeah.
I know we've talked a lot about sort of your past experiences, but now kind of switching towards the future. Where do you think the profession in music therapy is going? What would you like to see change or grow in the profession?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of a big question.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a good one. Okay. I think, and this is not my original thought, I'm pretty sure I got it from Dr. Marisol Norris, where she talked about the importance of collaboration for music therapists, that we really need to move beyond staying so siloed and insular. And one of the places that I think collaboration should continue to happen is with other creative arts therapies. I have benefited personally from working with a lot of drama therapists. We got to link up with drama therapists. Like, they are so awesome, and it's so compatible, and there's just such like, to me, it's such a reciprocal relationship. We have offerings for them and vice versa. I think like a stronger allegiance with other creative arts therapies is going to be really important for our collective growth. And I think with other disciplines in general, other ways of being, and kind of changing this lens of, I spoke about this a little bit earlier, of like challenging this notion that like we are the gatekeepers for using music for well-being, and like for music therapists to honor the fact that people have been using music for healing for thousands of years. And so if that is true, what is our part to play in that? You know, how can we interact with that reality and support that reality and still be valid in our roles as clinicians, but be considerate of the fact that we are not making this up for the first time, that we can honor this and maybe expand upon it and explore it more deeply. So I guess that reframing, I'm curious about how we will, I'm still clearly like reckoning with that and trying to understand that more deeply. I think that's going to be really important for us as a profession, for sure. And I think more intentional integration of culturally informed and affirming practice is going to be very crucial. And I think there are a lot of people working on that on multiple levels and multiple, academic, clinical, more, professional, administrative. So that I think is also, and that feels really connected to being more cognizant of community minded practices as well, to really be considerate of the role of culture and the saliency of music within cultural identity. So I hope we get more with that. I hope we get more arts-based research. I hope more music therapists are doing arts-based research. They're doing more participatory action research. Again, more community-minded, like instead of us as expert, community as expert, and how can we interact with that? That's my bias, because that's what I'm studying and curious about. But I hope that other people will do that too. Gabby's totally one of those people. I'm so thankful to be in this profession at the same time as some really like radical, awesome, anti-oppressive clinicians. I'm so stoked to be in their company. So I'm feeling hopeful. I am, for sure. Yeah.
Awesome. That is all the questions we have. Is there anything else that you would like to add before we finish?
I don't think so. Again, y'all ask great questions, like questions no one has asked me before. And I'm like, dang, I really should think about that more deeply. So thank you so much. Oh my gosh, it was such a pleasure to chat in this way. Thank you.
Thank you
for
for
being.
Yeah, awesome. And hopefully we'll be able to connect again sometime soon.
Yeah, that'd be lovely. Yes, let me know if either of you are ever, up in New York. I'm there. I could show you around, take you to NYU and everything. So that'd be great if we could cross paths.
Awesome.